We have three presenters. Okay. We have three presenters tonight. Myself, I'm Dwayne Crom, as I said. I'm with the Solano County Orderly Growth Committee for like the last 40 plus years. I'm also a former member of the Solano County Board of Supervisors. We also have Aidan Mayhood, who's running our show tonight. Aidan is a seventh generation farm family in Rio Vista. And following Aidan will be Marilyn Farley, former Fairfield City Council member and retired executive director of the Solano Land Trust. We had originally hoped to have Sadie Wilson from Greenbelt Alliance, but she has another meeting to go to tonight. We're busy. And she apologizes for not being able to join us. Okay, Aidan, next slide, please. What we will cover tonight, background on the proposed California Forever project, who's behind it and suing our farmers. Solano County land use policies and why the vote is necessary. Eastern Solano agricultural land and rare habitat, what a new city could mean for Solano County impacts to Travis, traffic, health issues, and more. And Solano together, how to get involved. Next slide, please. So this is a sample of some of the newspaper headlines that I'm guessing almost all of you have seen either on newspapers, social media, or TV. The press has been sort of endless, including we've had folks here in Solano County from France and Belgium. The story has got worldwide legs. Next slide, please. So what we know is that tech and venture capital investors have been buying up over 55,000 acres of agricultural land in southeastern Solano County over the past 6 years. And they have spent somewhere north of $800 million making these buys. Flannery Associates claims to be planning 1 to 3 cities, potentially up to 400,000 people, that will offer residents urban living, access to public transit, and a wealth of jobs and services. For the project to move forward, Solano County voters would have to drastically change the county's orderly growth initiative. Next slide, please. While we do not have a full understanding of who all the investors in California Forever are, what we do know is Jan Schremek in the upper right has been at many town halls. We kind of added that little sign there as our own editorial comment about Jan. And then below Jan are pictures of a number of the investors that have been identified through the New York Times article. And there's a variety of others that their names have become public in varying ways. But there's been no official disclosure of where the $800 million has come from, of which of these folks are the big spenders. Next slide, please. So the New York Times in August had this article that outed these guys. Up until the August article, which was late August, we had no clue who Flannery was. So now we know who they are, and we also know, we learned from that same article, a pretty interesting and not surprising tidbit about their motive. So as this says, this is per Michael Moritz, one of the lead investors. He estimated the return could be many times the initial investment just from the rezoning, and far more if and when they start building. If the plans materialize anywhere close to what is being contemplated, this should be a spectacular investment. We're not seeing much about affordable housing and services here, are we? He went on to add, the venture would relieve some of the Silicon Valley pressures they all feel, rising home prices, homelessness, and congestion. I think they want to export those issues to us. Next slide, please. And we know their values. Oops, that slide not loading.
So there we go.
There we go. So please read this for yourself and just think about what Mark Andreessen's family and values are like. They live in Atherton. It's the wealthiest town in Northern California, perhaps the wealthiest town in California, period. And they are adamantly opposed to having any kind of rezoning that would allow multifamily housing in their town. Next slide, please. So when you kind of think you own the world and you figure out and realize you really don't, and you have to deal with it, what do you do when you have a problem? You sue the farm families who won't sell to you. Next slide, please. So here's a copy of the front page and kind of the middle page of the lawsuit that Flannery has filed against. In the lower left corner, there's just a long list of names of family farmers, their trusts, their family members being sued allegedly for allegedly price fixing and collusion. And they're being sued for $510 million, family farmers. This is just ripping apart farm families in Montezuma Hills. And for talking to each other. I mean, essentially, they're being sued because they talk to each other over land prices and crop prices. I mean, what farmer doesn't talk to their neighbors? Next slide, please. So now we're going to cover the next section of this presentation, the Orderly Growth Initiative, productive farming, and valuable habitat. Next. So the Orderly Growth Initiative started back in 1984, and it was a voter-approved protection to take into account what the county general plan had adopted in 1980, which was city-centered development. And then in 84, there was a proposal, there were two proposals in the county actually, to do development outside of our existing cities. One was the city of Manzanita, which was proposed to be a new city between Vacaville and Winters. And then the original Rancho Solano development was proposed to be in the county and not in the city of Fairfield. So the Orderly Growth Committee formed and said, this is a mistake. It's a big change in adopted county policy. So we gathered signatures, went around and won a fairly narrow election to adopt the policies that are the core now of Solano County's land use, which is city-centered development and protection of farmland and open space. The 84 Prop A expired in 94, just they all sunset. It was renewed. And then in 2008, the county went through a comprehensive general plan amendment process that included another voter approval, which was Measure T that was on the ballot. And Measure T, again, specified that development in Solano County belongs in cities. Farmland and open space is to be protected from development. And the only way to really make a change to that was via an initiative. It was the out that had to be allowed by the law. And that is what Flannery is now trying to do by saying that they want to amend the Orderly Growth Initiative. Next slide, please. So the Orderly Growth Initiative. The county general plan restricts the conversion of agricultural lands to urban uses without a vote of the people. OGI, the Orderly Growth Initiative, directs development into our 7 cities, and virtually all housing for the past 40 years has occurred in our current cities. The Orderly Growth Initiative, as I pointed out, was originally known as Prop A, so people that have been around Solano County a long time still talk about Prop A. And it was again renewed in 94, renewed again in 2008. And the challenge in front of us, besides Flannery, is that it has a sunset of 2028. So after we get past this 2024 battle, we have to think about what we do in 2028. Next slide, please. So now we get to the Flannery lands. So when you look at the map here, all that stuff that's in gold, that's all the land and a little bit of yellow. All that land is owned by Flannery. It's all been purchased since 2017, very quietly. And as you can see, it stretches from the edge. Well, actually, they own land in Rio Vista, between Trilogy and downtown Rio Vista. So it stretches from Rio Vista all the way to the city of Fairfield. It almost completely surrounds Travis Air Force Base. And it's land that is productive farmland, it's threatened habitat, and it's land that is really needed for climate resilience and to protect Travis Air Force Base. Now we switch to Aiden, who's going to do dual duty, running the slides and talking.
All right. So once again, I'm Aiden Mayhood. I'm a 7th generation member of the Rio Vista and Montezuma Hills area, and I'm here to present for you guys as a member of Solano Together. So let's talk agriculture in Eastern Solano County for a few minutes. So agriculture as a livelihood and as a means to cultivating our food supply exists in a risky year-by-year business environment. Farmers in the Montezuma Hills and Jepson Prairie agricultural regions practice dryland farming of wheat, barley, triticale, oats, and safflower. Ranchers raise sheep and cattle. Since the 1850s, they have practiced a 3-year rotation system. For instance, in year one, they plant a crop and harvest it. In year two, livestock feed on the stubble and emerging grasses. In year three, the land is left to fallow and the cycle begins again. This is some of the most sustainable farmland in the country. No surface water or groundwater irrigation is used whatsoever, and crops only rely on rainwater. One farmer alone in the Montezuma Hills can produce enough wheat for 16,000 loaves of bread per day. That's 6 million loaves of bread per year, all just using rainwater. And this can kind of give you an idea of what the landscape looks like in the region. So the Montezuma Hills are the breadbasket of Solano County. So if we look at the map on the left and that deep red to purple area in southeastern Solano County, this area produces a lot more wheat and staple agricultural goods than other areas of Solano County. The land is not just pasture land, as California Forever likes to call it, as if that was a bad use for the land. It has a diverse range of uses, from cropland, grazing land, and as an important source of green energy with wind turbines. This is more of what southeastern Solano County farming and ranching looks like. So much of the Montezuma Hills are on adobe clay, particularly Diablo AR clay. This soil has shrink swell potential, meaning the soil has the ability to give up water, shrink, or take on water, swell. When soils swell, the change in volume can exert significant pressures on loads that are placed on them. This can result in significant structural distress and/or damage, potentially affecting construction costs for Flannery. Different times a year in the region. One thing that bothers me is that Flannery Associates repeatedly mischaracterizes the soils in the area as bad. These soils are very productive, and they would even be classified as prime farmland if they were irrigated. If you can see the green patch right here where this arrow is pointing, southeast of Rio Vista, you can see how soil quality has nothing to do with what constitute prime farming land in this area. This is actually an irrigated vineyard, and because it's irrigated, it is classified as prime. So now we're going to move on to habitat. The Habitat Conservation Plan was spearheaded by the Solano County Water Agency for all the county and its cities and is done to meet federal regulations. California as a whole has 3,458 native plant species, 60% of them found nowhere else. California is also one of 36 biodiversity hotspots in the world. The Habitat Conservation Plan, HCP, contains over 20 protected species. Some of this land on the above map contains irreplaceable habitat, such as Jepson Prairie, now surrounded by Flannery land. So the HCP tells us that Flannery Associates owns 57% of unprotected Delta green ground beetle habitat, 45% of Contra Costa Goldfield's core population areas, 82% of Swainson's hawks and burrowing owl unprotected reserve areas, and 48% of California tiger salamander upland. The uncertainty about the use of these essential habitat lands by Flannery is great. Will these species be protected? We don't know. Under the Habitat Conservation Plan for the county, Flannery also owns 48% of unprotected valley floor grasslands, 42% of unprotected vernal pool grasslands, of which 90% of vernal pools in California no longer exist, and 60% of unprotected freshwater marshes. Flannery has driven land prices up and are now dominant buyers of land in eastern Solano County, making it to where future developments in Fairfield and Vacaville and all future developments of Suisun City and Rio Vista now are potentially at risk. This is because Flannery has exacerbated competition for our conservation lands, which developers in our 7 existing cities need as well. Eastern Solano County is a major climate resilient landscape. Grasslands in the area are vital for groundwater recharge and for soil carbon storage. 20% of their parcels that they own are in flood inundation zones. Undeveloped lands in the Montezuma Hills provide cooling effects to mitigate heat impacts in the area. Importantly, the Montezuma Hills serve as ag land, open space, and as a source of green energy. The wind resource area in the Montezuma Hills produces over 1,021 megawatts of electricity annually. 1 megawatt can meet the demand of 500 to 750 homes yearly. New turbines in the area built in 2023 can now produce 4.5 megawatts of electricity, and they synergize well with existing agricultural uses by only taking up 1% of the land in the area. One second, please. Agricultural areas emit nearly 77 times lower greenhouse gas emissions than low-density urban lands. Over 100,000 metric tons of carbon is stored in above-ground vegetation on the Flannery parcels alone. Additionally, much of the land between Rio Vista and Fairfield serves as a feeding location for migratory waterfowl heading north. That's why there are roads in the area like Goose Haven Road and Little Honker Bay Road. Okay, and I think we're at Maryland.
Okay, well, my turn to take over for a little bit. So the next section is going to cover what Flannery's proposal means for all of us, or could mean for all of us. Next slide, please. Without seeing the specifics, it's difficult to evaluate all the impacts of Flannery's proposal, but we know they will be significant. Next slide, please. Solano residents are massively reliant on Travis Air Force Base. It handles more air cargo and passenger traffic than any other military terminal in the US today. Travis has 7,200 active military personnel, 4,300 Air Force reserves, and 3,800 civilian workers, pumps about $2 billion a year into our economy. Next slide, please. Local elected officials, chambers of commerce, retired military, and others have long been intent on protecting Travis to make sure it doesn't close. They fear that supply lines to Travis will be significantly impacted by Flannery traffic on Highway 12. As the red line shows, this is Highway 12 coming up and going into the south gate of Travis. And any Flannery development could impede the military's ability to complete its mission, get its supplies delivered. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The County Board of Supervisors recently approved a revised zoning overlay to restrict use of land near Travis to crop production and grazing. And this was in June, before there was any inkling of what Flannery had in mind. Next slide. The diagonal lines show the training area landing zone. It extends far into Flannery Holdings. Development can have detrimental impacts on the ability to practice takeoffs and landings and flight patterns, especially when there is a need to simulate conditions in hotspots around the world. The base does not comment on local land use, but when the top brass decide to close a base, it's likely an irrevocable decision. Vallejo is still impacted by the closure of Mare Island 27 years ago. Next slide, please. We are already a community of commuters. The California Employment Development Department estimates that 76,000 workers commute out and 32,000 commute in, based on an October 2022 report. If Flannery's project is built, our population would almost double. Solano County, its cities, and the Solano County Economic Development Corporation have long had programs to bring new industry here. No one argues that we need more jobs so our residents can work close to home. Flannery is promising jobs. It's an easy promise to make, but a hard one to keep. Other new towns have not fared all that well. The Flannery project's relatively remote location will be a deterrent to firms relocating there for the near and midterm at the very least. Next slide. And it won't just be workers who are commuting. Newtown residents will likely be commuting to grocery stores, doctor's appointments, and the like for many years. A recent study by Fairfield Consultants concluded that a population of 20,000 people is required to support just one full-size grocery store. Next slide. A new town conjures up images that we as taxpayers will be paying for new regional facilities such as roads, bridges, and water conveyance facilities. Flannery says they will pay their fair share. We are likely to end up paying far more than our fair share. Next slide, please. How many of our existing businesses or potential new businesses will locate in Flannery's utopia? How many state and federal grants will have to be shared? We've already heard that our lawmakers are being lobbied to divert resources to serve Flannery aims, such as putting the widening of Highway 12 above other currently higher transportation priorities. Meanwhile, our existing cities are crying for reinvestment. Next slide, please. We are proud of our diversity in Solano County. Vallejo, Suisun, and Fairfield are numbers 1, 2, and 4 in California for having diverse populations. We expect a range of negative implications for equity if this new town diverts tax revenue and investment away from Solano's existing cities. Impacts could include poorer health outcomes, loss of jobs, more taxes, and less food security. Next slide, please. The Orderly Growth Initiative sets out a number of goals, including some related to our health. Flannery's project is unlikely to benefit us. We don't see their project as increasing the supply of housing to our lower income residents or the homeless, or decreasing air pollution and traffic congestion, or alleviating stress on our fragile water supplies in an era of global warming, or sending more jobs to our existing cities. Next slide, please. Our one health impact related to traffic and air pollution is asthma, and that is already particularly significant in Solano County. 30% of Solano residents have asthma, compared to 14% for the state as a whole. People of color are far more likely to be impacted by pollution. We expect Flannery's project to make it worse. Next slide, please.
So I thought it would be appropriate for me to do this slide because I did all my years of schooling in Rio Vista as part of River Delta Unified School District. So the new town or towns will be somewhere in the River Delta Unified School District boundaries. This district covers a large portion of rural Sacramento, Solano, and Yolo counties and is managed by the Sacramento Office of Education. Rio Vista is served by 4 trustees, and rural farming communities in Sacramento and Yolo counties are represented by 3 trustees. Current populations in the area allow for a balance of interests between Rio Vista and river communities. As and if population grows west of Rio Vista, river community representation will dwindle, possibly to only 1 trustee. We don't know where new residents will choose to send their kids to school, but if it is a public school, this will be their district. A June 2023 memo suggested that there is a wait list for taking the bus within River Delta Unified School District, and many students already take ferries across all these rivers to get to Rio Vista's campuses. I think we
You're
got
muted, Dwayne.
I think I'm not muted now. So, housing. So there's always the challenge, I mean, particularly the last several years, of affordable housing and questions about how people are doing, how communities are doing. We're actually doing pretty darn good. Next slide, please. So this is data, lots of data. You can go to the California Department of Finance Demographics Division and find endless amounts of data and tables on growth for housing and population. This particular table shows our 7 cities plus unincorporated Solano County and the total for Solano compared to the state of California, starting in 1990, going through January 1 of this year. So it's very current data. And as you can see, if you look in the lower right corner in the orange columns, in terms of housing, we have grown considerably faster than the state of California has grown. We've had a 37% growth rate in housing, while the state of California has been 31%. Our population has kept pace with the state, but our housing production has exceeded the state. The other number I'd like you to look at that's in yellow, that's for unincorporated Solano County. And as you know, I mentioned, and multiples of us have mentioned, the Orderly Growth Initiative directs housing development into our 7 cities. And I think this number shows it pretty clearly. In unincorporated Solano County, we've had a 4% growth rate of housing, while the county as a whole, being all of our cities, has produced housing at a faster rate than the state. So in our opinion, the Orderly Growth Committee or the Orderly Growth Initiative has done pretty much exactly what we expected it to do. Next slide, please. So this slide shows RENA information, Regional Needs Assessment. So the state now tells the regional planning agencies, in our case, the Bay Area, ABAG, to go forth and figure out how to allocate required numbers of new housing units region by region. And then ABAG, in turn, says to the 9 counties in the area, here's what your share is going to be. So this is it's a target, and it's actually a target these days with some teeth to it. The state has the ability to come in and cause harm to cities, with financial harm to cities, and the ability or removing from cities the ability to allow housing and the state take it over if cities do not meet their goals. So as you can see, Solano County is targeted for almost 11,000 units of new housing through the year 2030. And that's, you can see again on the table how it's allocated between our 7 cities, a little bit in unincorporated, and also the allocation by income categories, very low, low, moderate, and above moderate income. So in this case, we're looking at a 7% growth rate over 8 years, almost 7, which is a little less than what we've experienced over the last about 30 years. But we're going to hit it. Our cities are doing quite a good job in working with their housing elements. So next slide, please.
All right, so what about water? The Solano subbasin in the darker green-blue color on the map here on the left was severely overdrafted in the 1950s and is now governed by a sustainable groundwater management plan. Relying on this source for 400,000 people would have severe impacts for the county and for land subsidence. Additionally, building new infrastructure to get water from the North Bay Aqueduct will take significant resources we might all have to contribute ourselves. So if you look at the map here on the left, the Solano subbasin sits within Solano, Sacramento, and Yolo counties. It receives on average 23 inches of rain in the west and 16 inches of rain in the east. Rio Vista, Dixon, and Vacaville rely on groundwater supply, with Rio Vista and Dixon relying on groundwater supply solely. Sustainable agricultural practices in eastern Solano County have saved a lot of water in this area, where irrigated farmlands between Vacaville and Dixon use 70% of Lake Berryessa's water supply to Solano County. How will 400,000 residents impact the county's water supply? We're not sure yet, but it's not going to be good.
Okay, now I'm going to talk again for a little bit. So the Bay Area has a plan Bay Area 2050, and it outlines the future of our 9 Bay Area counties. This plan supports urban growth boundaries around the cities and focuses new development within the existing cities. Flannery prefers an earlier version of the plan, which anticipated more development near Rio Vista, but that plan is no longer in effect. Next slide, please. Plan Bay Area should bring more jobs to Solano. It describes priority production areas, or PPAs, which are prime sites for job growth in the middle wage sectors. The majority of the PPAs are concentrated in the North Bay and the East Bay, where housing is plentiful, but job opportunities are more limited. And that's us. If you look at the map, you can see along the I-80 corridor that there are orange areas and maroon areas. And these are priority development and priority production areas. So none of them are within Flannery's holdings. Next slide, please. So a final topic we wanted to talk about, no farms, no food, no future. Food security is a topic of major concern for governments around the world. With war in Ukraine disrupting wheat supplies worldwide, and with climate change induced flooding and drought, food security will become an ever more important issue. It will be an increasingly more difficult issue for people with limited resources as prices rise and some food is no longer available. If we abandoned our farmland for sprawling new cities, this problem will grow worse as agriculture adjusts to the new realities of where they can grow crops. We hope all of our food in the future will not come out of test tubes. Next slide.
All right, so who are we? We're Solano Together, and we're a budding coalition uniting to protect Solano's future. We've been a coalition for just a few short weeks, but in that time, we've held 3 meetings, formed a steering committee, created a logo, and are putting together a website that should be available very soon. So far, our coalition members include Greenbelt Alliance, Solano County Orderly Growth Committee, Sierra Club California, the Jepson chapter of the California Native Plant Society, Napa Solano Audubon, the Community Alliance with Family Farmers, and Fibershed. And we hope to have a much broader range of interests represented with us soon. So here's our vision and our mission, and these help to serve for our values that we're going to share with you next. And here's our fundamental values that may change. They may be revised slightly as we get coalition members, but these are values that are going to stick with us for a long time. And so, number 1, we advocate for smart growth and investment in our existing cities. 2, we support the continued vitality of Solano's agricultural industry and heritage. 3, we protect the ongoing security of Travis Air Force Base. 4, we promote responsible management of public resources. 5, we protect threatened habitat, steward climate resilient landscapes, and support clean energy production. 6, we advocate for abundant housing for all income levels. And 7, we demand transparency and accountability from Flannery Associates and decision makers. So what have we been doing? So far, we've been educating the public on the facts of this proposal through social media, fact sheets, panel discussions, and our soon-to-be website. We've been building a coalition to fund campaign activities, spread awareness, and ensure that voters are getting the information they need. Importantly, we've been providing an alternative narrative for Solano's future, one driven by the residents of Solano County. And finally, we've been preparing to oppose Flannery's 2024 ballot initiative, and we're in here for the long haul. And so that concludes our presentation, and our contact information is listed below, and now we can enter in comments and questions. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to start with the comments from the chat, or questions from the chat. Can one of the presenters identify where the video of, quote, barren land, unquote, which California Forever has used at the town hall venues was taken? It gives the impression of abandoned, unused land.
I think Dwayne can answer.
Actually, Julie, I was having trouble hearing that.
So
let me speak into my microphone.
Okay.
If that helps out. Can one of the presenters identify where the video of, quote, barren land, which California Forever has used at the town hall venues was taken? It gives the impression of abandoned, unused land.
Yeah, I've seen that video. I've seen a lot of their still shots. I don't know where they took those photos, but as you can see in the photos that we've put in front of you tonight, this land is anything other than barren. It's very productive land. It's dry land farming. So this time of year, it's starting to green up, doing, July, August, September into October, it looks pretty dry out there, but it's relies on rainwater. That's why it's dry in the summertime. If you go out starting in roughly February, these lands look like Ireland. They're just stunningly brilliant green and beautiful. And as Aidan pointed out, highly productive. So Flannery somehow cherry picked at like the wrong time of the year, right time of the year for them, and found the worst thing they could find to be part of their pitch. It's what you expect them to do. It's the kind of people they are.
Well, I think you keep in mind that if That picture could have been taken somewhere down there. I think probably it was. If it's being allowed to fallow for a year and it was growing wheat, it's going to look dry and dusty. That's just the nature of what is produced there. That would be what I would say. Aiden, you were starting to say something?
Yeah, and I think Dwayne, you've mentioned before where they had that 800-person survey where they quoted that this land
yeah.
was barren and unusable in that survey as well. So it's not just the videos, it's their own words as well.
Right. Yeah. They're distorting what this land looks like and what its value is.
I am reading and typing at the same time. How much of Flannery acquisition lies within the bounds of Rio Vista? What is the likelihood / process for them getting more land annexed to Rio Vista?
I think maybe I can take that question.
So what we've heard, and I believe this to be true, is they own 500 acres within the city limits of the city of Rio Vista. So if it's within the city, it's already in the incorporated city. And if they wanted to develop there, it would take the normal city development process within Rio Vista. The initiative they're talking about would cover lands that are outside of Rio Vista that are governed by Solano County.
And their parcels almost completely surround Rio Vista. So Rio Vista, if it wants it to grow in the future outside its city limits, Flannery is going to be the partner that they're going to have to deal with for that.
Okay. Are there any circumstances under which the presenters would consider adding an 8th city into Solano County?
Any circumstances, I guess maybe, but that discussion would actually have to start with the existing 7 cities. I mean, we have made a very concentrated effort to try to do everything we can to help our existing cities grow. And are those 7 cities, are they interested in having another competitor out there? So if there were to be a discussion, that's how I would start, by convening a meeting with our 7 cities.
Okay. Is it possible that the state will come in and overrule the orderly growth initiative?
Well, so far, to the best of my knowledge, the state has not done that on land use issues. But we've seen the state come in and the state changed the law. We had another initiative on the books in around the same time in '84 that limited the amount of trash that could be hauled in the Solano County. And that was an initiative battle and won. And several years, well, a fair number of years later, the owners of the Potrero Hills landfill complained kind of bitterly and wanted to expand. And we got into a big debate about whether that initiative was enforceable or not. The county had taken a vote to not enforce it because, in my view, of a misreading of a federal lawsuit that happened in Michigan for hauling of trash between Canada and the U.S. But the state stepped in. I'll never forgive Fiona Ma for doing this. She was the one that led the charge to get a bill passed that undercut local initiatives for controlling landfills within their jurisdiction. So can the state do it? Yeah, I suppose the state could do it. I'm confident that our current state legislators won't let that happen, but there's there's big money out there.
Okay. Is there a reason that the Montezuma Hills land isn't irrigated?
That's a good question. I know that people have been farming there since the 1850s. It's rolling hills. So if you see this picture here, you have slopes from 2%. And then when you get closer to Collinsville, you're probably looking about greater than 15% slopes. I don't know if Dwayne or Marilyn have anything to add to that.
Well, allocation of water in Solano County is done by and large by the Solano County Water Agency, which is a coalition of the 7 cities, all of the Board of Supervisors, and 3 of the 3 biggest irrigation districts in the county. And because the Montezuma Hills traditionally never received water, I think that tradition just held. So Berryessa, which is managed by the Solano Irrigation District, The bulk of that water, as Aidan pointed out, goes for irrigation for lands that are from kind of Dixon north and then west into Sassoon Valley, Green Valley. And that agricultural land that's irrigated, they get a good deal for buying the water. But this is such a large area. If that area was looking to be irrigated by Solano project water, I think it would be a real hit to the rest of the county.
Yeah, I think the answer to that lies in thinking about this area as a historic farming area. It's been farmed since sometime in the late 1800s. And I think that probably traditionally that's how it was farmed, and that the farmers never saw a need to change. That would be my guess. But I think you'd have to ask a farmer, and I'm not a farmer, and well, Aidan has a farm family, but
I think that, it's just productive land, and we've been really good stewards of the land in the sense of water conservation, and it does the things we need it to do.
Okay.
And so, yeah.
At what point in his presentation, Aidan mentioned a flood inundation zone? What is it and why is it important to the environment?
Yeah, so these areas are, say there's 100-year flood that happens within the future. These are areas where the flood waters are going to go. So if you look at the area northwest of Rio Vista, below Lindsay Slough area, these are areas where floodwaters would be reaching into our inland zones if there was a major flood. So not the best areas to build if you wanted to build.
Okay. The chief investor, Mr. Moritz, stated that this project will be a spectacular investment and that one or more growth multiples could be realized simply by rezoning. How would that be possible?
So classically, the biggest money to be made from development, housing development, is when you get the initial change of zoning from agriculture to residential, 15 units per acre or whatever you go for. That single change in zoning, all of a sudden the value of your land goes up dramatically. They can't, so this will be a little bit of the politics and land use law. So the Orderly Growth Initiative restricts general plan, so which now designates all this land as agriculture. So if they get an initiative that says, let's change that general plan designation to something other than ag, like residential development, state law says that the local government, the county in this case, has to rezone consistent with the general plan. So it would take a while, but the process would be that to be consistent with state law, that the county would have to then start rezoning the land that is changed if Flannery gets an initiative passed that changes the general plan land use designation.
So in your presentation, you stated that there is currently enough housing being developed in Solano County. Are you aware of the current housing prices and rental prices in the county? I don't know that that statement is accurate.
Well, yeah, I think everybody's aware of what's happening with housing prices and rental prices, and it's it's a state and region-wide issue that's pushing prices up like crazy. And I think in a lot of cases, people leaving the Bay Area to come to Solano because we are the cheapest housing area in the Bay Area. No matter how scary it looks to us in terms of housing prices, it's even worse if you're in other counties in the Bay Area. And yeah, we need more, and that's part of what the state has been pushing for in terms of these housing allocation processes that they're going through with ABAG. And each of the 7 cities now has what's called a housing element. They're in varying stages of being complete, and the state has to approve the housing elements for each of our local entities to make sure that each city is building its proportionate share to satisfy what the state can see looking demographically and what the needs are. So do we have enough region-wide? Obviously not. Will there be enough going forward? We hope so. We hope that's how the process will work. And what have we done historically? We've exceeded the state in terms of housing growth.
I
But
like
we're
to.
not going to fix the housing problem for the region or the state of California in Solano County.
That's how I like to frame it, is that I think it's great to be aware of a Solano or a California-wide housing crisis and even a regional Bay Area housing crisis, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Solano County has a housing crisis. And what I think Solano County should be focusing on is that we have a jobs crisis. You look at somewhere like Menlo Park, for instance, and they have 9 jobs per household there. Solano County has 0.5 or less jobs per household. And so just adding more houses into Solano County will mean more commuters going to outside counties for their jobs. So that's my thought on that.
Can the marsh be protected?
Can the marsh be protected?
Yes.
Is that the question? So Flannery did not buy any land that's in the marsh. So the Sassoon Marsh has something called what's it called? The Sassoon Marsh Protection Act that was passed by the state a lot of years ago. So a big regional organization called Bay Conservation and Development Commission actually has the strongest oversight over the marsh. And Flannery's not looking at doing anything that's within the marsh that's in lands that are protected by BCDC overview.
And then how is this opposition not just NIMBYism? It seems that the critique against increased population and developing more of that the critique is against increased population and developing more of the county.
Sorry, Julie, I had trouble hearing that one again.
How is this opposition not just NIMBYism? Not in my backyard. It seems that the critique against this development is increased population and developing more of the county.
Well, as the chart showed, we've been population-wise, we have grown at pretty much exactly the same rate as the state in the last 32 years. And we've produced more housing percentage-wise in terms of housing growth rate than the state has over that same 32-year period. So, we have not been a slow growth or a no growth county whatsoever. We're growing in terms of housing faster than the average across the state.
What
And
about
we
the
will continue to do that.
What about the gas deposits? I don't know.
Aiden.
Yes, so this is the Rio Vista area is the #1 gas field in California, and it's now a depleted gas field. And I think it had about 3.3 trillion cubic feet of gas in the area, and now there's reserves of about 300 billion cubic feet of gas. So the area west of Rio Vista is potentially an area that, if carbon sequestration was something that the county would be interested in, that this would be the prime location to do it.
Well, and in fact, Levine, it used to be Levine Fricky, has a large area there where spoils have been deposited that come out of the bay. And now they're proposing to have a carbon sequestration operation there that takes the carbon in a pipeline from across the river and gets deposited underground right adjacent to this project. That proposal is going through the not sure what agency's processing it right now.
Okay. Someone in this meeting mentioned that Flannery claims it has its own water. How can that be?
Well,
Aiden,
they do have, they've purchased, I think, 5,000 acre feet of groundwater that is coming out of one of the sloughs.
Surface water.
It's not groundwater.
Oh, I'm sorry, surface water. Yeah, surface water. And then they own some acreage that has almond trees on it, and I think that they expect that they can extract water that would otherwise be used for almonds for that purpose. Aiden, do you know more about that particular?
Yeah, so when it comes to the 5,000 acre feet of water that they currently have, this comes from the Lindsay Slough area that crosses Highway 113. There's some questions about whether that water could be used for urban purposes. I think this is something that state water agency boards might have to decide. It might even be something outside of Solano County's purview. There's regulations to where if it's used for ag purposes, can it be used for urban purposes? Sometimes the water it can't travel outside of the parcel that has the water rights. So if Flannery wanted to transport the water rights they have from surface water, there's a question to that. So there's lots of questions that I don't think that they can claim right now that they have the water, but we'll have to see what the plans say.
Yeah, some of you may have been at or watched the Solano County Water Agency meeting about a month ago. And Flannery was asking to enter into that they would help pay for a study in cooperation with the water agency, take a look at the North Bay Aqueduct, clearly so that Flannery could get access to water that's flowing through the North Bay Aqueduct. And there was a very strong opposition to that by the water agency board.
And I think not to mention that if this alternate intake project were to happen, it would be in the exact same location of the single tunnel project for Southern California. So they could be in a potential battle with Southern California water interests as well. So I don't think water is going to be an easy issue for them.
Okay. And in addition to schools, etc., did they mention any additional hospitals or even clinics?
No.
I haven't heard anything about healthcare facilities.
Okay. Are there opportunities for residents to get a side-by-side look at the proposal with pros and cons presented by both advocates and opponents?
Well, we haven't seen their project yet.
Yeah.
So that makes it a little different. I think once their project is revealed, all they've been doing is showing us pictures of what it might look like, and not pictures that appear too realistic to us. Once the project comes out, I'm thinking that we will probably be evaluating the project, trying to figure out what it means, and doing more analysis and study of what the implications are. And we'll probably have new material.
Yeah, so I'm sure there'll be a lot of opportunities for doing public debates. I mean, once their initiative language is revealed, the initiative is if they do this, the initiative is likely to be hundreds of pages long. It's not going to be something simple that just says a few words about policy. If they want this to work, it's going to have to take an incredibly deep dive into the legislative language. So for right now, at least, there's one debate scheduled, which is with Jan Schramek and me at the Solano Economic Development EDC breakfast in early February. So if you look on the Solano EDC website, I think you can find the date of that breakfast meeting and just kind of a general discussion about their project, and there'll be representation from both sides. But I would be willing to bet there will be lots of community discussion and debate. And we want that. I mean, one of the things that's driven us nuts about how they've done all this is such secrecy. They bought the land in absolute secrecy. It took a New York Times investigative reporter to figure out who these people were and what their objectives were. And that just happened in late August. We've only known about this for about 3 months in terms of any details. And the details are sketchy. It's all kind of vague promises and pie in the sky kind of stuff. As one of our early growth members puts it, there are various polls and assertions or things like, would you rather have free strawberry ice cream on Tuesdays and Thursdays or free chocolate ice cream on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday? I mean, that's the kind of level of discussion that Flannery has entered into. There's been no meaningful, let's talk about the realities of what it takes to get water. How do you solve the traffic problems in a very meaningful way? So stay tuned.
Okay. And just to let everybody know, I am going to finish off the questions that I have currently and not ask any more because it is currently 8 o'clock. So we're getting close. Has anyone reached out to California Forever to see if they were willing to debate this issue with the other side in a public forum? I know you guys have kind of gone over that, but has there been outreach?
We have
Well-
already had a forum. We live in a retirement community, Paradise Valley Estates. We had a forum, 2 months ago now? With Jan Smearek, Bill Dodd, our state senator, Mitch Mashburn, the supervisor that represents our area, and Steve Bansell, who's on the Airport Land Use Commission. So that was a panel discussion that was attended by maybe 100, 150 of our residents. So there has been one debate so far.
You really can't call it a debate.
Well, no, but it was a discussion of views by those people.
And
And some interchange.
I'll also say whenever I'm going to every California Forever town hall, and I'm constantly talking to their head planner and their head transportation lead and the head infrastructure lead, and hearing their thoughts and seeing what they have to say too. So those conversations are definitely happening.
I'm interested in what effects this will have on Solano County's employees. Have any estimates been made of additional workload, new positions being necessary, basically additional costs that would be added to the county's amount?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So, Flannery talks about new cities, and they talk about trying to grow fast and potentially up to 400,000 people over who knows how much time. But they have said nothing about when they would expect to start building, nothing about the rate of development that they would expect to see in their area. And again, there's been no relationship discussion with cities about, if we're growing 1,000 houses a year across our 7 cities, if Flannery expects to do another 1,000, does that bring an additional 1,000, or does Flannery cannibalize some of the housing development that our 7 cities are attempting to do? All of which impacts the labor force for the county, for health and social services, sheriff's department, just courts, a variety of things. And Flannery has just not provided any information whatsoever.
If Flannery has already purchased this farmland, which they have, what will become of the farms if their development has stopped? Is it possible they could be sold back to the original farmers or new farmers?
We're speculating. When you put an $800 million investment in almost 56,000 acres, it's sort of hard to unwind that. We have a few examples in the county where, on a much smaller scale, the development was stopped. Lynch Canyon, they both involve, a couple of them involve the land trust. So Lynch Canyon was originally proposed to be a dump. When that was stopped by county initiative, and eventually they sold it to the land trust to be a park. Patwino Wortlaw-Kadoidehi was also proposed to be a 600 plus unit, 27 holes of golf type development. We stopped that through politics, and they eventually sold to the land trust, which is now a wonderful park. The Manzanita site that I mentioned earlier, with the new town that was planned between Winters and Vacaville, once that was stopped, they ended up selling to Heinz Nursery. So when you go up 505 and you look to the west, that Heinz Nursery commercial farming nursery property, that was originally planned for another new town. But nothing on the scale of what Flannery's doing. But we've confronted similar projects, but smaller in the past, and the development didn't happen.
Yeah, the Patwino project, 1,500 acres, was, once they had development rights on there, it was valued at around over 200 million. And by the time that they decided they couldn't develop it and sold it to the land trust, it was sold for 13 million. So, part of the issue out there is going to be that Flannery has paid so much for that land that if they certainly aren't going to be able to resell it to farmers at those prices that they bought it for, which means that if they can't do their development, what do? Do they walk away from it? Do they have a fire sale? What happens? I'm concerned about that issue too, because we listened to a hearing that the state Senate Agriculture Committee held a few months ago. And there was someone from Fresno County, the ag commissioner from Fresno County, was saying that that a Canadian firm had come in and bought up a very large number of acres and then ended up not developing it. And instead of continuing to have it farmed, they let it just turn into weeds. And those weeds started infesting neighboring farmlands. And they said it was now a $5 million project just to try to eradicate the weeds. So that is definitely a concern. And I've heard from one farmer that a piece that Flannery has bought is already being not taken care of properly. So it's a big concern.
Okay, sorry, I'm doing a couple things.
Sure.
There is a proposal for carbon dumping as part of the carbon capture and storage project in the Montezuma Hills. Are you aware of this, and do you have any idea what Flannery would do with this? Carbon dioxide, which they will be dumping, will kill you in high enough quantities.
Well,
So
we know that that's being proposed. That's what I was talking about earlier, the Levine project.
yeah, so I think
And
there's one
I don't know what Flannery thinks about it, but if I were him, I'd be concerned.
I think there's one project maybe that's looking at the Montezuma wetlands, which are west of Collinsville. And then I also think that Flannery has received proposals from a company named Air Liquide regarding carbon sequestration, but they haven't advanced anything past that proposal at all. So
Okay. What happens to the Solano City's plans for development if this is implemented?
well, I think we can kind of start off with the habitat conservation plan, which I had mentioned earlier. Current and future developments for our existing cities are now going to have to compete for conservation lands that Flannery owns between here and Rio Vista, and that competition might hinder the ability of our existing cities to grow in the future. Dwayne, Marilyn, any other?
Well, that's good.
Well, I think what you're saying is that when cities do development, they often have to mitigate for impacts. And some of these lands were planned to be used for mitigation. So if Flannery owns them, that means that they are quite likely not available for mitigation by the existing cities in the county. And that could impede individual developments from moving forward. I think it's kind of a complicated issue because it would depend on what you're mitigating for and how much. But certainly the Habitat Conservation Plan was designed over many, many years to try to provide opportunities for mitigation while preserving important habitats. So it's a complicated issue.
If this Flannery plan passes, wouldn't the state still require low and middle income housing to the Flannery plan for any areas zoned housing?
Well, so the RENA numbers for the county are relatively small. So if Flannery were to go forward with development, a lot of it depends on timing. It might not meet this RENA cycle. It might be the next RENA cycle, which would be after 2030. But the county then would be in the position of having to permit any of the development. And the county would, I would think, would have to enter into negotiations with Flannery about how do you provide enough, very low and moderate income housing and not just above moderate. Most developers are reluctant to get into the lower end housing because they just don't make the money, and it usually has to be forced upon them by the local government. So, hard to say how that would work out, but nobody in putting long range plans together like ABAG or the state or the RENA process ever anticipated anything like Flannery rising up and saying, here's what we want to do.
Okay. Which interest groups have expressed support for Flannery, if any?
Which what?
Which interest groups have expressed support for Flannery, if any?
I haven't heard of any.
They do have member representation on their community advisory board, but that doesn't necessarily mean that those organizations support Flannery's project at this time.
And then I have a couple follow-ups to the growth question. So because the county has grown as fast or faster than predictions, there is no room for it to grow any faster.
No, actually, again, all land use stuff gets complicated. Each of our 7 cities has something called the sphere of influence that surrounds it. And that's looking into the future beyond what fits within the current urban footprint. So that is stuff that's worked out typically with LAFCO that I mentioned earlier. So there's room. I haven't looked at every city to see if there's a sphere of influence, if there's room for every city to grow. I know that Fairfield, Vacaville, Dixon, and Rio Vista all have significant sphere of influence space. Sassoon and Benicia and Vallejo, I think, are more constricted.
Okay. There was already stress on the health of the marsh due to freshwater diversion. How can they be allowed to divert more? So this was on the marsh question.
Yeah. Beats us.
Okay.
One thought on that too is that if they somehow are able to use the surface water that they have from Lindsay Slough for a potential city, I would imagine that would cause saltwater intrusion to
Right.
come up further into the Sacramento River, which not only affects Solano County, but there's numerous surface water reliant farms in Sacramento County that I'm sure would, cause an uproar about this. So.
Okay, and on that note, we do have a statement from Mark Stevenson saying Napa Solano Audubon, I hope I'm pronouncing that correct, is concerned about the rare and endangered plants, amphibians, and birds that inhabit the vernal pools and grasslands located in this region. Okay, and then
Yeah, Mark had a letter to the editor in the Daily Republic just in the last day or two.
so that reaches the end of the questions that we have
Wow.
from the chat. That was actually quite a few questions.
Thank you, Julia.
No problem. Thank you
Yeah,
guys
thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you to all 3 of our presenters for this really, really important topic. And certainly we have learned a lot of information. I think I speak for everyone in the group when we say that we are appreciative of your knowledge on this subject and your patience with all the questions. Certainly you can understand with all the questions that are being asked of you that people are really, really wanting to know more. So what I'm hoping is that when Solano Together's website goes live, that you will definitely let me know so that we can put it on our club website, put it out to the membership. And I hope that those of you that are guests this evening, you now know the club email address. You can certainly check in with me at that address to find out when, and I say when, we have another presentation with more information, because it sounds like it's a very fluid situation with lots of things continuing to happen. So we are hoping that we can have you come back and talk with us again when you have more information. So thank you to the 3 of you, and everything that was in the chat, as usual, will go out to all the membership. For those of you that would like to get the contact information that was in the chat, certainly if you want to put your email address in the chat now, I can make sure that you are included in that communication that goes out to the club members the day after we have a meeting. So I'll wait a couple minutes to allow that for anyone to put their